Mr. Treasurer, we're just waiting on either Director Swallow or Director Bobzian, or both.
Thank you, Deputy Jimenez. Director Brown, looking good up there. Lincoln-esque.
Good to see you, Treasurer.
It's good. We're just kind of, Mike and I are just really enjoying the room. It's a nice room.
I think one of these buttons opens the pit where the sharks with laser beams are at somewhere. So.
Yeah, no sharks, no laser beams. We've got two and one mad sage grouse.
Good afternoon, everyone. Just to confirm, I believe we have Director Reynolds and Director Swallow on the virtual meeting, correct?
That is correct.
Thank you, Director Reynolds. Do we have Director Bobzian? Well, Mr. Treasurer, you do have a quorum. If you'd like to wait for Mr. Bobzian, or if you'd like to get started.
Well, let's get going and we can get through some of the early stage stuff, and hopefully the director can join us. Please mark him present when he arrives. Deputy Treasurer Jimenez, would you please take the roll?
Treasurer Conine.
Here.
Director Bobzian. Director Michael Brown.
Here.
Director Reynolds.
Here.
And Director Swallow.
Here.
Thank you. You have 4 members present, 1 absent at the moment, and 2 vacancies, but you do have a quorum.
Director Bobzian's on.
Thank you. Director, we'll let the record reflect that Director Bobzian is here.
Perfect. Thank you. At this time, I'd like to open meeting with the first section of public comment. Comments from the public are invited at this time. Is there any public comment in Carson?
You have no public comment here.
Okay, there appears to be no public comment in Las Vegas. Do we have any public comment on the phone or electronically?
You do not.
Great, thank you very much. Moving on to agenda item number 3, approval of the minutes from the State Infrastructure Bank Board of Directors meeting from January 5th and from March 28th, 2022. Any discussion on this? Otherwise, I would accept a motion.
2 quick corrections on these.
Please.
Thank you, Treasurer. For the board members present, please correct Department of Energy to Governor's Office of Energy.
Will do.
Otherwise, looks good.
Absolutely, we can make that change. Thank you. Any other comments? Okay, I'll accept a motion to approve those with that change.
I move we approve the minutes with those changes.
Second.
All right, we've got them. Thank you. Do we have a second?
Second, Director Bobson.
Great, we have a motion and a second. Any discussion of the item? Hearing none. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed?
Can I, Director Swallow, can I just note an abstention from the minutes of the April meeting? I wasn't there.
Absolutely. Thank you. All right. With that abstention, we are approved. Moving on to item number 4, informational item, a presentation on the state of Nevada's general obligation bond sale to capitalize the state infrastructure bank. Deputy Treasurer of Debt Management, Jeff Landerfeld. Jeff, go ahead.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Chairman and members of the board. For the record, my name is Jeff Landerfeld, Deputy Treasurer of Debt Management. First, I'd like to note for the record a typo in my memo for agenda item number 4. The 2 statutory references in paragraphs 2 and 3 should reference NRS 408, not 403. As you know, Assembly Bill 492, Section 16 of the 2021 legislative session authorized the issuance of general obligation bonds in the maximum face amount of $75 million to fund eligible projects as defined in NRS 408-55053. This represented the first authorization or appropriation for the NSIB since it was created by AB 399 in the 2017 legislative session. On March the 8th, the State Board of Finance approved 2 resolutions pertaining to the issuance of the bonds authorized in AB 492. Series 2022A in the maximum principal amount not to exceed $40 million to provide loans to entities for the purpose of matching federal grants for infrastructure projects as defined in NRS 408, and Series 2022B in the maximum principal amount not to exceed $35 million to provide loans to entities engaged in financing affordable housing and charter school infrastructure projects in the following amounts: $20 million for affordable housing and $15 million for charter schools. The proceeds from the issuance currently reside in 3 interest-bearing custodial accounts: budget accounts 7040, 7041, and 7042 for matching affordable housing and charter schools, respectively. Once the State Infrastructure Bank Fund and its accounts have been established, the proceeds will be transferred at the direction of the NSIB Executive Director. Both series were issued as taxable general obligation bonds and amortized over 5 years. The debt service for both series will be paid from the Bond Interest and Redemption Fund. Series 2022B was self-designated as a social bond to emphasize the intended purpose of the bond proceeds to be used for social infrastructure. Social bonds carry certain obligations to meet the intent of the principles outlined by the International Capital Market Association related to the use of proceeds, project evaluation, management of proceeds, and post-issuance reporting. In keeping with our commitment to follow these best practice guidelines while administering the 2022B proceeds, we will be requesting certain project-specific information from the NSIB staff until all proceeds of the 2022B bonds have been spent. At this time, I'd be glad to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you, Deputy Treasurer Landerfeld. Any questions from board members?
Thank you.
All right, I just want to confirm one more time, no questions from board members on the phone. I can't see anybody, so I just want to. Okay, hearing none. Thank you, Director. Hearing none, this was an informational item, so we will close that and move on to item number 5, approval of the investment policy statement of the Nevada State Infrastructure Bank and direction to staff as appropriate for discussion and possible action. Chief Deputy Treasurer Tara Hagan, welcome.
Good afternoon, Treasurer, members of the board. Tara Hagan for the record with the Treasurer's Office. We are seeking the board's approval on the investment policy for the bank. Just the investment policy just generally is going to provide that framework for the bank's objectives and help define roles and responsibilities and then clarify anything that it may need to. As you can see in the memo, just the policy defines the 3 primary investment objectives, and those are in order of priority order: safety, liquidity, and then the return on yield. And so I think obviously, as Mr. Landerfeld indicated, you have the $75 million in proceeds. We want to maintain that capital. We also want that capital available or liquid when you want to distribute that for projects, shovel-ready projects. So with that in mind, staff is recommending that the most efficient and effective means for the monies today would be to maintain those in the state treasury. So that would be, we commingle monies here, so in general fund, obviously, is one of the larger portions of what we call the general portfolio, the highway fund, and also the debt reserve fund. So with the $7 billion that we manage, this would just be managed there. Obviously, the general portfolio has the same priorities with the safety, liquidity, and return, and there would be, no fees. So we just think that that's the most efficient means to manage the money. And also knowing that this is a living document. The investment policy can be changed as the board has different sort of priorities that it may have for the investment. But there is, just to bring the board's attention, there is one section that does allow for outside management of funds for state treasury. Obviously, the goal here is that at some point in time, the bank would issue debt. And so you may have requirements in a resolution that would have monies outside state treasury. So it does take that into account. So with that, staff is recommending two things really here today. As I mentioned, the approval of the investment policy for the bank, but then secondarily to direct staff, so since there's currently not an executive director, to direct staff in the treasurer's office to work with the governor's finance office, state controller's office, and the Department of Transportation to set up these budget accounts so they would be consistent with what you have in regulations, which you have there in your memo, but I'm happy to repeat them. And that would allow those monies to move from the custodial accounts to these budget accounts, and then also do some proper accounting paperwork so the authority is there when the projects are approved and the money needs to go out the door. So with that, I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Chief Deputy. Any questions from board members on what we're trying to get done here? Okay, hearing none, I would accept a motion to approve the State Infrastructure Bank investment policy statement as presented and direct staff to work with the Governor's Finance Office, State Controller's Office, and the Nevada Department of Transportation to establish budget accounts under the bank which conform with the regulations governing the administration of the Nevada State Infrastructure Bank.
So moved.
Second.
Thank you, Director Swallow and Director Brown. We've got a motion and a second. Any discussion? All right, hearing none. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? All right, motion passes unanimously. Thank you. Moving on to agenda item number 6, approval of the financing application for qualified borrowers of the State Infrastructure Bank and direction to staff as appropriate. And we have Chief Policy Deputy of the Treasury, Eric Jimenez. Eric?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. For the record, Eric Jimenez with the Treasurer's Office. Beginning on page 28 of your board packets, you will see a revised version of the financing application that was originally presented to this board on January 5th. Since that time, we've undergone a massive public engagement campaign on the regulations for the State Infrastructure Bank. This document has changed in 3 kind of ways. One was to incorporate feedback from Director Reynolds, Director Swallow, and Director Bobzian on some of the questions in the application. 2 was to conform the application to the regulations that we promulgated in April. And then finally was to take in some of the public comments that we had gotten on the financing application as well. We'd be happy to take any questions here, but the intent here today would be to approve a financing application with any changes that needed to be made. And then staff is also recommending that we work with NDOT and our other budgetary partners to establish a website which will house this application. So when we do get an executive director on board, hopefully shortly, that application can begin to be completed by applicants and we can begin to finance some projects as soon as possible.
Thank you, Chief Deputy Jimenez, and I just want to thank the other members of the board for their feedback through this process. We have a better application because of it, and I think it's exactly what was intended putting this board together, so we could have subject matter experts on their specific places be subject matter experts. So thank you for that on my behalf and on behalf of staff. Any questions for Mr. Jimenez?
No, I just, this is Director Reynolds, wanted to thank Mr. Jimenez for his work on this and for incorporating the changes that we had discussed at our last meeting. So I appreciate that. Everything looks good. So thank you.
Thank you, Director. Any additional questions? All right, hearing none, I'll accept a motion to approve the financing application for the Nevada State Infrastructure Bank and to direct staff to establish a webpage where interested applicants can access it.
So move.
Second.
Director Reynolds.
And I'll second.
Excellent. Thank you, Director Reynolds. Director Brown, I believe. Any discussion on the motion? All right, hearing none. All in favor? Aye.
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 Any opposed? All right, motion passes unanimously. Thank you. And Chief Policy Deputy Jimenez, we'll stick with you for agenda item number 7, a informational item on our search for an executive director.
Thank you, Mr. Treasurer. Eric Jimenez for the record. We just wanted to provide the board an update on the search for the executive director since we had begun this process several months ago. I think at the same meeting that we worked on the financing application and some of the changes that were then incorporated into the regulations. We have opened that application. We have received 28 applications so far for the executive director of the infrastructure bank. We have started, staff has started to formally vet those applications and has done a series of interviews with final candidates. We have about 5 final candidates to date. We are hopeful to provide that list to you all at the next meeting. We're just trying to round out the last 2 interviews with folks. And we would encourage you, if there are any interested candidates that you have that you think would be good for this, we are trying to get this appointment done as quickly as possible. So please let us know. Otherwise, we will work to close the posting. As you may recall, this is a gubernatorial appointment, but in conversations with the governor's office, they have asked this board to vet the final applications and then make a series of recommendations for the governor's consideration. So if there's any questions, we would be happy to take them, but staff is diligently working to get this appointment moving as quickly as possible.
Thank you, Chief Policy Deputy Jimenez, and I'll just echo that comment. Certainly, board members, if there are candidates that you think are special and would be interesting in this role, we really are looking for somebody who can be a great leader and a bit of a vanguard here, right? Because we haven't done this before, so we want to make sure we get this hire right. Any questions for Eric or Deputy Jimenez on this item? Okay, hearing none, we'll close that item. And that brings us, and thank you, board, for another efficient meeting, to our second period for public comment. Comments from the public are invited at this time. No one has arrived here in Las Vegas. Is there any public comment in Carson City?
There is not.
All right, any public comment online or on the phone?
There is not.
All right, thank you, everyone. We are adjourned.
Thank you.
Thank you.